Wanna play?
Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play? Wanna play?
Wanna play?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Wanna Play. My name is James McKenna, and you read the title right. For the second year in a row, over the month of October, I managed to watch a different horror movie every single day. However, there is a difference between this year's ranking and last year's ranking, because this year's ranking, it's all brand new movies. New horror movies that I have never seen before, never, I guess, got the chance to check out until now, until there was a space open to watch 31 brand new ones. So, while last year included ones that I had seen before, stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, stuff like Return of the Living Dead, this one, apart from only one, is all brand new watches that I've never seen before. So this, for every movie that you hear me talk about in this video, this will be the very first time. So without any further ado, it's time to rank all 31 horror movies that I watched over the month of October. Let's get straight into it. Right, so most of these movies are very good. They're either okay to very good. Apart from Sharks of the f***ing Corn. Yeah, so this was recommended to me by Horror Gang, fellow horror YouTuber if you don't know, and he called it the worst movie that he had ever seen, and he challenged me to get through it. And I did. And I don't know why. This was painful. This was really, really painful, and this is, like, legit. Like, there are movies that are so bad that they're good. There are movies that are so bad that they're just terrible, and then there's, like, this. No. It's that bad. Sharks of the Corn. Yeah. Title checks out. This is last place, without a doubt.
Try to use my name, that's fatal. Try to claim my fame, but that's fatal.
At number 30 is gonna be Frogs. Now, I was expecting to have a good time with this movie because, you know, it's a 70s movie about killer frogs, but the reality is it's really not that. It's a bunch of, like, random characters that are, I guess, a family in a lake house, and then every now and then it'll cut to, like, stock footage of frogs with spooky music over it, and then, like, every now and then somebody will die by, like, tripping over a snake. It promises you killer frogs, and then it gives you random cutaways to frogs as other things are happening, and that's really all this is. This is really boring, this is really bad, and without question, it has to be this low. At number 29 is gonna be Halloween Ends. That's right, this low down, because it really is that bad. It's like, it's a conclusion to a movie series that introduces a whole bunch of new things, gives us a whole bunch of new mythology that could have been cool if this was a standalone, but they completely wasted it by putting Michael Myers actually in it, effectively making the entire first hour and 20 minutes of this movie a complete waste of time. And I think that's really where this goes wrong, because the acting is great, the directing is great, the cinematography is great. It's just the storyline is just so disappointing and insulting to Halloween fans. It's like it's this kid who is kind of taken under the influence of Michael Myers, and then he just dies with 15 minutes left in the movie so Michael can fight Laurie, and then they put him in a trash can. It's dumb. Like, it really is that dumb. Like, I strongly dislike this movie. While I don't think this is the worst Halloween movie, it's not because this movie isn't bad, it's because Halloween is a franchise with some real stinkers, and 5 in Resurrection just so happened to be worse than this, so I think it really is that bad, and it is the third to worst movie that I watched this entire month. At number 28 is going to be All Hallows Eve 2. Now, from my understanding, from what some of you commented on my Terrifier and All Hallows Eve ranking, which I didn't know before doing that, is that this is just a compilation of short films taken from YouTube and kind of just mashed together. Like, if that's actually true, let me know again, because that's a lot of you said that, and yeah, doing that doesn't give you a successful movie. This movie's paced all really weird. It's just like some of the stories are like 2 minutes, some of them are 20 minutes, and you never know like when the stories change. So you're watching and you're like, wait a minute, are we in a different story? It's not very good. It's a compilation of just random short stories from YouTube that they threw in there. It gives me, as I said in my ranking, it gives me Creepshow 3 vibes, and that is not a movie that you want to be compared to. So for me, number 28 is going to be All Hallows Eve 2. Number 28 is going to be Ape. Yup. Ape. A 1970s movie about a giant Bigfoot. Yeah, you know, it's something. I'll give it that. I'll be honest, it's decently entertaining. The ape costume just looks so stupid. It's like, this movie is one of those movies that's just so dumb that you can't not enjoy it. Like, yes, it is bad, which is why it's ranked so low, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't get some enjoyment out of the utter stupidity of this movie. Another one recommended to me by Horror Gang, who's pretty much an expert on these terrible movies, because he's probably seen the most out of anybody that I know. So, you know, when he recommends you a movie and he says it's bad, that means it's pretty bad. And this, much like Sharks of the Corn, although I will be honest, this is The Godfather compared to that movie. The other movies on this list are just better. I'm sorry, this movie is so bad it's good, but it's still bad. So it's gonna be number 27 on my list. Coming in at number 26 is yet another 70s movie, that is Cannibal Man. Now this is one where I was kind of just like browsing through Shudder looking for the most interesting poster and title, and this one popped up and I watched it and it was pretty decent. It's about a guy who accidentally kills a dude, and then in order to cover up that murder he actually starts killing other people, and it's interesting, it's decent, it's just kind of there. That's the only problem with it, is that of all the movies that I watched this month, this is the one that is kind of just, it didn't really stand out. Like, it's got a cool concept, it's got a cool premise, but as I said, it's just kind of there. Like, the other ones that I watched this month are just more memorable, better. As I usually say when I rank a bunch of movies like this, there are some of them that just kind of get lost in the shuffle, and this is a prime example of that on this list. Like, this movie isn't bad at all. It is good, but when you're watching it in surrounded by 30 other ones, it's not really going to be ranked much higher. It's good, but it's not as good as the rest on this list. At number 25 is Creep. Again, a good movie. It is, but it's not great. I think it's creative, it's a different spin on the found footage subgenre, and I think that our main villain is pretty creepy and he's pretty messed up, but movies like these, I guess they're just not my thing. Like, this is just a little bit too weird. It's kind of the same thing over and over and over again. Like, the guy says something really strange in a kind of like, not feminine, but like a softer voice than, you know, a dude that looks like this would. And the guy's like, hey, yeah, you're cool, yeah. And that's just like, it repeats that over and over and over and over until the main villain just kind of puts an axe in the guy's head, and that's the movie. So, it's decent. I think that if you're a fan of found footage, you would absolutely love this, and if you like found footage movies, definitely go check this out. It is definitely a different spin and a different take on that subgenre, but it's just not for me. So, for me, Creep is gonna be number 25. At number 24 is going to be Creep 2. Now, this one is definitely a step up from Creep, but not by much. It was definitely difficult choosing between Creep and Creep 2 for which one I preferred, because I mean, I kind of feel the same about this one. It's very similar, it's just a different victim than in the original Creep, but at least this one has the victim, like, being smart and fighting back and not going through with all of this weirdo behind the camera's nonsense, and she actually fights back and she actually wins in the end. So just because of that, just because the character that we follow is a little bit more smarter than the guy in the previous one, this is definitely going to be ranked higher, but it still has the same, I don't want to call them issues, just issues for me. Again, found footage isn't really my thing, these characters aren't really my thing, I'm not as attached to them as, you know, some other slasher or other horror villains. So Creep 2, it's decent, it's fine, but it's not my thing, so it's gonna be number 24. Number 23, and believe me, I ranked this as high as I could, because with all these movies I watched this month, you're gonna start seeing very soon that I pretty much enjoy every single one of them, and pretty much I enjoy them all because they're great movies. I enjoy this one, but by no means is it a great movie. It is Robomonster. Yeah, this might be another one recommended to me by Horror Gang, and this is definitely the best one that I watched this month that he recommended, because this might just be the greatest so bad that it's good movie I have ever seen. It's about an alien who comes down, kills everybody on Earth apart from like 7 people. And you might be thinking, oh, an alien that kills everybody? What? This must be crazy. What does he look like? It's a dude in an ape suit and like a space helmet with antennas on. I kid you not. All I need to do is show you this scene right here.
You are human. Your people were getting too intelligent. We could not wait until you were strong enough to attack us. We had to attack you first.
I think you're just a big bully, picking on people smaller than you are.
Now I will kill you.
You look like a pooped-out pinwheel.
This movie is fantastic. The only problem is it's not as fantastic as some of the other ones on this list. So for me, Robomonster is awesome, but it's not going to be any higher than number 23. Number 22 is the new Predator movie that came out just this year, Prey. I didn't get a chance to check this one out when it originally came out, so I decided, what better time to watch it than in this month? And I will be perfectly honest with you, I would rather watch Robomonster 500 more times before I would watch this again. But this is a way better movie. I can't bring myself to say that Robomonster is better than Prey, because it's not. This movie is great. It's definitely the second best Predator movie, although that's not exactly a high bar. But in my opinion, there is a reason why it's ranked this low, because for me at least, this is just a little boring. Like, I was watching and I was like, okay, Predator, where are you? Hello? Like, the Native American, I guess, you know, that whole aspect was super cool. It's really different. It's a new spin on not just Predator movies, but horror itself. Like, there really hasn't been a movie set in a time like this. And it's definitely interesting, it's definitely unique, but for me, Predator's just, it's kind of like Creep. It's just not my favorite franchise, and for me, this is definitely the second best Predator besides the original, but it's still not my favorite movie of all time. So for me, Prey, it's great, but it's going to be number 22, at least on this list. Number 21 is the Slumber Party Massacre. Now, I've seen part 2, so I was like, I mean, might as well check out part 1 this month, and yeah, it was decent. It was a decent little horror movie, you know. I like kind of the behind the scenes, how this was made, how the director was a woman, and how she actually, like, feels about this movie. It's cool. Like, this is definitely a good horror movie. It's nothing amazing, like it's not gonna change the world or anything, and I think the nudity can be a bit much sometimes, like there's a lot, but I mean, yeah, it's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with this. It's a decent little 80s slasher, but I guess the only problem is that the other movies on this list are just, I guess, better. Like, this is a decent horror movie, but it's nothing like, as I said, it's not going to change the world. So for me, it's good, but it's going to be number 21 because the other movies on this list I just think are a little bit better. Starting in the top 20 is gonna be, I'm sorry, The Craft. Now, this movie is not bad at all. It isn't. This movie is great. Every movie, pretty much from Slumber Party Massacre, or even Prey, or even Robomonster forward, I really like. I just don't love it. It's great. Like, I'll be honest, it's great. But for me, it's just a little bit too similar to everything that was coming out around this time. Like, that's really the only complaint that I have about it, is that it's just so similar to everything else. Like, so much of the cast is from so many other horror movies, and it's like one of the ultimate, like, 90s stereotypical kind of, you know, Kevin Williamson type horror movies. I'm not sure if Kevin Williamson even wrote this, but because of the time it came out in, it sure as hell feels like he did. So for me, The Craft is great. I really like the story. I really like the characters. Of course, Neve Campbell is in it. You can never go wrong with seeing her in a movie. So I like it, but I just like the other ones a little bit better. So for me, Craft is good, but it's going to come in at number 20. Coming in at number 19 is going to be Event Horizon. Now, I actually like this movie more than I thought I would, because I'm not actually the biggest fan of horror movies in space. Like, for example, even like the Alien franchise. I like the first two. Everything else after that, I'm probably never going to watch again, because I'm just really not into them at all. But Event Horizon was decent. Like, you've got a really good cast, and you've got an interesting story about this giant alien spaceship called the Event Horizon that nobody has seen in years and years and years, until it randomly resurfaces, and it's revealed that it was like enough of a technological advancement that it actually managed to travel at like light speed into some like completely different galaxy, but it came back with an alien life form on it that can pretty much, almost like The Thing, I guess, can kind of just control your mind and can take you over and can kind of make you see all of your biggest fears and biggest insecurities. So it's cool. Like, I really like it. It's a late 90s space horror movie, so the effects aren't great, but I think that the storyline and the characters and the actors, the actual cast of the movie, more than makes up for that. So Event Horizon, it's great. So for me, it's going to be number 19. Coming in at number 18 is going to be All Hallows Eve. Definitely one of the better anthology horror films that I've ever seen, and yeah, this is really good. It's definitely a major step up from All Hallows Eve 2, because it follows kind of a narrative story about this babysitter that is babysitting these kids, and they get a mysterious VHS tape on their front porch, and they watch it, and each kind of segment is split up by, you know, the VHS grain popping up, and then it'll cut to the kids, it'll have a scene of them, and then it'll cut back to another story, and in between each story, things get creepier and creepier with the family until, of course, Art the Clown shows up in his film debut and is like chopping people to bits, and Art the Clown is the star of the show. It's not hard to see why he was picked out of all the villains featured in this to be the main star of the Terrifier franchise, because he is as awesome in this as he is in Terrifier and Terrifier II. So this is definitely one of the better anthology horror films that I've ever seen, but Art the Clown absolutely steals the show here. So for me, number 18 is going to be All Hallows Eve. Coming in at number 17 is going to be 28 Weeks Later. Now, it's another one where I've seen 28 Days Later, but I just never really got around to watching the second one until now. And yeah, while I don't think this is better than 28 Days Later, it certainly is good. It's not bad at all. It's definitely a solid follow-up to 28 Days Later. Like, the zombies are equally as ferocious when they're running, and although running zombies aren't my favorite thing, I know a lot of people do prefer them, but for me, I like the, old style Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Day of the Dead a little bit better than the quick running zombies, but 28 Days Later, of all the quick running zombie movies, I think does it the absolute best, and 28 Weeks Later is pretty much the same. I think the characters are great, storyline is great, and it's a solid follow-up. We've got the same score returning from the original, which is honestly probably one of the best horror scores ever, so you can't go wrong with having that in a film, and it's definitely a solid follow-up. Not as good as the original, but I think it's definitely getting there, and supposedly I guess we're getting a 28 months later pretty soon, is something that I've heard. I'm all for it, why not? 28 Weeks Later is good enough to be number 17. Coming in at number 16 is going to be another pretty much brand new movie. It only came out in September. Barbarian. Now, this one was a really strange experience for me. The first maybe 30 minutes, the first act, I guess we could say, I loved. Like, I was on track to this being one of my favorites of the whole year because of just the tension and kind of dread that it showed us put to screen was just unreal. But it's one of those that when it shows, as soon as it shows the monster, and it shows the monster at kind of an awkward point in the film too, it loses pretty much all the credibility that it had built up to that point. And then it kind of cuts to a completely different story. Like, randomly all of a sudden the monster comes out, and then boom, Justin Long for some reason from Jeepers Creepers is seen driving down a mountain. But then, weirdly, which I don't think I've ever had this experience before, the more the monster showed up, the more okay I was with it. So it was like, it went like this. I was really, really liking it, and then it kind of sunk back down, but then it rose back up. The only problem is that it didn't rise all the way up. It pretty much rose kind of to here. So it's a really weird experience. It's like a movie with 3 different parts. The first act is the best, the second act is not the best, and then the third act is in between. It's like, okay. So it's a really strange movie to rank because I have so many feelings about it. So I've kind of just gone and put it in the middle because I really can't think of a place to rank it because it's just so strange of a viewing experience. So Barbarian, it's definitely unique. I will give it that. But I'm not exactly sure if that's for better or for worse in this case. Coming in at number 15 is going to be Malevolence. Now, I actually really enjoyed this. I wasn't exactly sure what this was all about. Like, I just got it recommended from one of you guys, and I put it on my list. And then I looked it up, and I was like, wait a minute, this is actually kind of interesting. And what it is, it's these bank robbers that go up to this house with kind of like these 2 girls that they've abducted. They have the girls in the house, but then it turns out that there's another serial killer in that house, and he just slaughters everybody. But I think it's really good. I think it gives kind of Halloween vibes. Like, sometimes he'll be in the background, and you're not sure if you saw him. He might be there, he might not be there, just like Michael Myers. And I think his look is good. He's got that Town That Dreaded Sundown, Friday the 13th Part 2 kind of bag over his head, and yeah, I like it. It's got a great kind of just out in the country atmosphere. It's one of those movies, and I like it. I think it's definitely a good example. If you're somebody that's into kind of like, these atmospheric horror movies, these atmospheric slashers especially, this is definitely one to check out. I really like it. At number 14 is The Faculty. It's dumb. It is really dumb, but it is really funny. Like, the amount of jokes in this movie that, like, actually made me laugh is maybe more than any other horror movie that I've ever watched. Like, these jokes, the way that they were delivered by the cast and crew, who are pretty much just, like, sad teachers, kind of just, like, there making the, you know, kind of, not depressed jokes, but kind of, you know, jokes that are delivered in, like, a really monotone voice. Like, that's my humor right there, and this movie is full of it. One of the best lines is, like, a teacher comes in and she's sick, and the teacher asks, "Why didn't you take a sick day?" And she's like, "I'm saving my sick days for when I'm not sick." It's just, like, stuff like that is just so, like, frequent throughout the movie, plus just, like, the absurdity of, like, the entire, like, scenes where, like, the whole football team is rushing at them and the coach, and it's a blast. It is so much fun. It's one that came out kind of in the same time as, like, Scream and The Craft and all of that, but I think that, Ryan, you're gonna kill me, unlike The Craft, this one manages to stand out amongst the pack. So, for me, The Faculty is a lot of fun, and it's gonna be number 14. Number 13 is gonna be the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal. Now, I do have a few issues with this film, but it's still Hannibal Lecter played by Anthony Hopkins, and no matter how flawed the movie is, it's not gonna be bad when he's around. Because, yeah, he delivers another absolutely legendary performance as Hannibal Lecter. He absolutely kills it yet again. And I think that the story is pretty good as well. The only thing is that I think that it's weaker than Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon, which are the only other two Hannibal movies that I've seen. And also, it doesn't have Jodie Foster in it, but it does have Clarice. She's just played by a different actor, and it is pretty awkward seeing Anthony Hopkins talking to not Jodie Foster and referring to her as Clarice, but it's still good enough, I think, to be classified as a good movie, because it's a Hannibal Lecter movie, it's a Silence of the Lambs movie, it's directed by Ridley Scott, so although it is definitely on a lower tier than Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs, it's still Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter and directed by Ridley Scott, so it's not bad, it's just not as good as the other two, but it's still good enough to be this high, so it's not bad at all. Coming in at number 12 is going to be a silent film called The Last Laugh. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. This is probably the only time I'm ever going to talk about this movie on this channel because it's not a horror movie. It's like the original clickbait. It's directed by the guy who directed Nosferatu, and it's called The Last Laugh. But it's a story about a door greeter in New York City who all of a sudden gets replaced and becomes depressed about it. It's not a horror movie, but I still included it on this list because I watched it this month, and I probably shouldn't have, but it was the only movie that I got to watch that day, so I kind of have to. I'm kind of obligated in order to call this a 30. So yeah, this is almost also kind of clickbait because 31 horror movies, and I actually talk about 30, but this is still a good movie. Like, it's ranked at number 12. It's directed by F.W. Murnau, who's one of the best silent film directors there was. So yeah, it's really good. Like, everything, all the drama going on, and all, like, the actual emotion of the film, and the performance. The performance from the doorman is unreal. It's one of the best performances in a silent film that I've ever seen. So yeah, although it's not a horror movie, it's still a great movie, so it's gonna be number 12. But don't watch this expecting it to be a horror movie like I did. But it still ended up being great, so find yourself at number 12. Now back to your regularly scheduled horror movie rankings. Number 11 is gonna be Hellraiser. Not the original, of course, the new one from a few weeks back on October 4th or something like that. Can't remember exact dates, but no. Hellraiser 2022 is really that good. It's the best Hellraiser, as I said in my Hellraiser ranking video, since Part 2. Although I would probably rewatch 3 and 4 over this. From an objective standpoint, this is the best Hellraiser since Part 2, and maybe even the best. Like, if I take away my nostalgia and enjoyment for the original, this might even be better than the first two. It's that good. Like, this is such a treat for fans of the Hellraiser franchise, because we've just, for 6 or 7 movies now, we've just been given Pinhead in a completely different script that had nothing to do with him that they threw him in just so they can make a quick buck. This is an actual, legitimate Hellraiser, like, with care put into it. Clive Barker signed on as an executive producer who wrote the original novella for Hellraiser, The Hellbound Heart, and even directed Part 1. Hell yeah, like, this is a great movie. Pinhead is awesome. The Cenobites are awesome. It's got some of the best kills in the entire franchise. Some of the best lore, I guess. Some of the actual best, like, Cenobites lore. The Lord of the Labyrinth comes back and everything. This is such a good Hellraiser movie. And without question, it's going to be number 11 on my list. Kicking off our top 10 is one that is probably going to be shocking to a couple of you that it's this high, and believe me, I'm just as shocked. The Car. This was so much better than it had any right to be. Like, people are gonna call this, and I've actually already seen people call this a rip-off Christine, despite the fact that it came out like 6 or so years before Christine. But this movie is just awesome. Like, the lengths that they go, just how just insane and large scale this gets is so awesome. And unlike Christine, it's pretty much like reality, like all of the stuff that Christine does, like it makes sense for a car to do. This car, like, there's a scene which is honestly maybe the most memorable scene out of every single movie that I watched this entire month, where this girl, it's actually like a really good scene. A girl who's like one of the main characters of the movie. It's almost like a moment like out of Psycho. She's like the main character of the movie, and she's on the phone talking, and there's a giant window behind her, and slowly you see 2 lights beaming, and they get closer and closer and closer until all of a sudden, I kid you not, the car jumps 10 feet in the air and just smashes through the window, through the wall, through the girl, drives out the other side of the house, and just takes off. It is unreal. Like, it is unreasonably great. This movie is so awesome, and don't be surprised if I talk about this movie a lot more in the future, because it is so much fun. And anybody who's heard of this movie and has wanted to check this movie out but hasn't yet, I implore you to do so, because you will not be disappointed. The Car is awesome. So much stupid fun, and in my opinion, it's going to be number 10. At number 9 is going to be an all-time classic. That is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Now, this is one that I didn't really know pretty much anything about before turning this on, but I ended up really enjoying it because this is a movie that's just so great and so far ahead of its time. It's from the 60s, and it follows this kind of pretty, she's like pretty old. She's not like an old lady yet. She's maybe like in her 50s or 60s, but back in the 1910s and 1920s, she was a child star, and her sister was also a child. Like, they were stars on TV, and they were stars on, like, you know, Broadway and stuff like that when they were kids. But now that they're older, they're pretty much like kind of these just like a child star is now. Like, all of the stuff that is coming out now and that we're learning about now about like child stars from like the 80s, 90s now growing up and becoming really a shell of their former selves and becoming like it's sad to see a lot of these child stars nowadays. It's sad to see kind of what they become. And this told that story in the 60s. Like, this woman, she was a star as a child, and so was her sister, but her sister is seeing a resurgence in her career. They're starting to play her movies more and more and more, when she, of course, Baby Jane, that was her name when she was a child star, all of her stuff is being left behind, and nobody seems to remember her. So this drives her just slowly through the movie, just to the point of insanity. There's really only like 1 or 2 kills in the entire movie, but that's just how much of a slow burn this is. But it's just executed so well. It's so smart. It's so ahead of its time, and it's just great. It is honestly, it's not one that's like, it's not a slasher. Like, you don't, if you're somebody who's into horror movies for like blood and guts and like fast-paced kills, this is absolutely not the movie for you. But if you're somebody who likes kind of like slow burn and like kind of long-term storytelling, if that's the right term, this is absolutely for you. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is a classic for a reason, and I really, really liked it. Coming in at number 8 is one that I referenced earlier in this video, and that is Red Dragon, the prequel to The Silence of the Lambs. And although it isn't as good, saying you're not as good as a movie that won 5 Oscars could mean that you're the second greatest movie of all time. Which it's not, but it is. It's almost like what Dr. Sleep is to The Shining. It's great. It's if you were gonna follow up Silence of the Lambs, it was never gonna be as good, but this is probably the best they could have done. It follows an FBI agent named Will Graham, who actually was the one that realized Hannibal Lecter was a cannibal in the first place, and the one that locked him up. Now, a couple of years later, Will Graham, this detective, is investigating another case of the Tooth Fairy murderer. And it's one of the hardest cases that he ever has come across. They just can't seem to find this guy. So, what does he do? Much like Agent Clarice Starling, he goes down to Hannibal Lecter's little, almost like, cave and enlists his help in finding this killer. And it's really, really good. Like, the suspense in this film is awesome. Everything about this is great. It's really well acted. It's written by the same guy who actually wrote the original Silence of the Lambs movie anyways, so, as I said, if you're gonna follow up Silence of the Lambs, this is the perfect way to do it. Hannibal Lecter comes back, of course, played by Anthony Hopkins yet again, and it's great. At number 7 is gonna be Mandy. The first one that I watched out of the entire month, and I don't think I can really describe this. If you've ever seen a review or anything on Mandy, you will know that this is just like a psychedelic drug trip the entire time. And yeah, they're not wrong. And it's awesome. Like, I know a lot of people, their big thing in movies is, what's the story? What are the characters? And although this one doesn't really have it has a story and it has characters and it's a revenge plot, but it's more about the visuals and more about the feeling that it gives you. And for me, that's like my type of movie. Like, my favorite director is Stanley Kubrick. Like, 2001: A Space Odyssey doesn't have a plot. And for a movie to be this crazy that it reminds me of a Stanley Kubrick movie, you know that means I'm putting this in high regard. And Mandy it's legit. It's not going to be for everybody. If you're not into those kind of movies that kind of make you think and make you try and just feel weird and tripped out instead of actually like delivering you a straightforward story, this isn't going to be for you, but it is absolutely for me. This movie's visuals are just so unreal. It can be so brutal at times. Nicolas Cage is awesome, and you can tell that he's really into this movie and he's really into what they're making. And when Nicolas Cage is into what he's doing, that is usually a pretty good sign that the movie is going to be good. So for me, Mandy is, it lived up to all the hype, and it comes in at number 7. At number 6 is going to be The Lighthouse. Another one of those horror movies that has always been on my radar, and has been on my radar for like years now, but I just never really got around to watching until now, and I guess, it was worth the wait, because this was one of the most interesting, one of the most unique, and one of the most creative horror films that I have ever seen. The cast consists of 2 people, I guess 3 if you include the mermaid that kind of shows up in visions. But just like the suspense and the build and just how creepy and insane this can get, and just the whole mystery of it, like what's actually in the light at the lighthouse, and just everything, just how small and claustrophobic the setting is. If you're somebody who gets like seasick, you might want to just avoid this movie altogether, because it takes place on this one island in this one lighthouse, and it's just water as far as the eye can see. But it's A24, so they managed to make it creepy, compelling, and awesome. This is legit one of the most creative and unique horror movies that A24 has done. It's one of my favorite A24 movies now, and it's absolutely going to be ranked this high up on the list. Number 5, yet another prequel and yet another recent movie. That is Pearl. I'll tell you what, if you're a prequel guy, I gotta hand it to you, this has been the year for you. We got the Predator prequel, now we've got Pearl, they randomly dropped an Orphan prequel, and for some reason it was as good as the original, and now we've got the news for a Friday the 13th prequel made by A24. What is going on? And this might just be the best one. I would have to really consider Pearl versus Orphan First Kill as, what's my favorite prequel, because they're both great but for different reasons. This one is great because it is a very, very great movie. It's so good. It's another one by A24. And just the way that it makes you feel, and the way that it actually sucks you into the movie and the story and the characters and the plot, it's one of those rare movies that just completely sucks you in, and you feel like you're in this world because of how well it was shot, how well it was acted, and how well it was directed. The monologue scene when Mia Goth, who of course plays Pearl, is monologuing to her sister-in-law, who's I guess kind of subbing in as her husband. It's one of the most chilling monologues that I have ever seen. You want to know what that monologue reminded me of? It reminded me of Nicole Kidman's monologue in Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah, it was that good. Just the performances of this movie, and again, the slow build, and how good this movie looks too. The colors in this movie are great. It's one of the best looking movies of the year. It's unreal. A24 just continues to be probably the best modern horror distribution studio out there, because they just consistently pump out horror movie of the year potential, and this is absolutely up there as top 3 at least horror movies of 2022, and maybe best horror prequel of all time. So for me, of course, Pearl is going to be number 5. At number 4 is going to be one that I've heard called the most underappreciated horror movie of all time. So of course, naturally, I had to check it out. That is Frailty. And yeah, they're right. I loved this. Just how creative it was, and how it was told as kind of almost pretty much like a Forrest Gump kind of story, like a Green Mile kind of story, where it's a person in present day kind of, reminiscing about the past. And it's just so good, and it's so compelling. It's about this father and these two kids who just like lead this normal life until one day the father wakes up and says, "Last night I had a vision from God. There are like demons taking over the world released by Satan, and it's our job to go around killing them." But of course there are no demons, and they go around killing random people, and his dad ends up killing all these people in a barn in front of his two kids. And then slowly one of the kids actually starts to get into it, but the other kid, who's of course the older one of the two, realizes that there's something up. And then it's revealed at the end. I'm not gonna spoil it because it might just be, it's at least top 5 best twists in all of horror. So I will not spoil it. I will just say everything you've heard about this movie is true. It may be, like, I know it is in many people's opinions, and it might just be in my opinion as well, the most underappreciated horror movie of all time. If you ever get the chance to check out Frailty, absolutely do it because it is that good. Number 3, Terrifier 2. Of course it was going to be ranked this high. This is probably horror movie of the year. And I know this is probably going to be controversial to say because pretty much everybody does think it is. The Black Phone was that good. I'm putting it out there right now. When I rank every horror movie that I watched this year, of course, all the 2022 horror releases that I watched this year, just warning you now, don't be surprised if The Black Phone does end up at number 1, but my god, is it close, because this movie rules. People have been speculating ever since the first Terrifier came out that maybe Art the Clown maybe is going to be the next horror slasher icon, because we really haven't had one since like Chucky or Ghostface. And I'm pretty sure Terrifier 2 just solidified Art the Clown as the next slasher icon, because this movie is just unreal. It's brutal, it's unrelenting, it's insane, and I probably had the best viewing experience of this movie compared to any other horror movie that I've ever watched. There was like 6 or 7 of us, and we were just all just completely just so into the movie and so into all the kills and just how crazy this was. Crazy viewing experience for all of us. This movie is awesome. It is so, it's just so crazy. It's so over the top. It is just so overboard with absolutely everything, and it's just so great. It is so much fun, and absolutely without question, this is gonna be my number 3 pick for this list. But at number 2, shockingly, because I pretty much thought that throughout almost the entire month that Terrifier 2 was going to be number 2, but one beat it out. That's the Babadook. I watched it for the first time this month. It's been on my radar for about 5 years now, and for whatever reason I just never watched it until now. And I'll tell you what, it was worth the wait, because this is now one of my all-time favorite horror movies ever. Like, I just love the suspense, and I love how it was shot and how like dimly lit everything is, and how just creepy it gets, and slowly throughout the movie you start to see kind of like flashes of him, and how creepy the book is, and how creepy like the pop-ups are. And when that scene in the kitchen comes, when it's just total darkness except for like a slight bit in front of the mother, and all of a sudden the Babadook shadow slowly emerges out of the darkness. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. That was one of the creepiest scenes I have ever, like easily top 3 creepiest scenes I have ever experienced while watching a horror movie. The Babadook is so good. It's not perfect, I'll be honest. That kid is pretty freaking annoying at times, and I wasn't a huge fan of when it actually, towards the end, when the kid flew up the stairs and it starts to get really supernatural. But I think everything out, the greatness of this so far outweighs the negatives that it's almost as if the negatives aren't even there. The Babadook is just, it's one of my favorites now, and do not be shocked if you see me talking about this a lot more in the future, because it's so good. But coming in at number 1, of course. Now, I said at the beginning of this video that every single one of these watches is brand new. I've never seen it before. Well, I neglected to mention, because it would pretty much be a spoiler for what did end up topping the list, that there was one. And it's a yearly watch for me. You would know that if you watched last year's 31 horror movies in October video ranked. It's Halloween. I know, this movie's been beaten to death by every movie reviewer on the planet, so I'll keep it short. This is just one of the greatest horror movies of all time. No question. I know I'm gonna get some commenters saying it's boring, and I don't know why everybody loves it so much. Well, it's because it's one of the greatest horror movies of all time, and that's all that needs to be said. Number 1, the yearly watch, Halloween. It's probably gonna end up topping every single video of these I do. No matter how many years I continue watching 31 different horror movies in October, I wouldn't be shocked if every single one of these lists in the future ends up with Halloween being at number 1. So, sorry, might be a little bit of a letdown, might be a little bit predictable, but it's true. So thank you for watching my second annual ranking of all 31 movies that I watched over the month of October. If you made it this far, thank you, because I know that this video is going to be pretty freaking long, judging by how long the actual individual clips that I'm recording are, so this is definitely going to be a longer one, so if you stuck all the way through, thank you so very much. But until next time, I'll keep this short and sweet. I want to thank you all very much for watching. You can follow me on Instagram at JamesFromWannaPlay, and if you have followed me on Instagram, you would know which movies I'd be ranking, because I posted them every single day, each and every time that I watch one. I took a little picture of maybe the title card and a poster or something. I threw it up there, and yeah, you would have known which horror movies to look out for. So, thank you for watching this video. Goodbye, and good night. Bang.